everybody, Mike Iaconelli back out in the shop with another great video for you today. And in today's shop, we're going to be talking about where the fish go in the winter. Today's shop's all about what fish do, where they go, where they're living in the winter time, okay? This is a time of the year, I think, when a lot of people assume that fish are uncatchable. But guys, listen to me. Please, if you're watching this video, don't put your rods away in the wintertime because the fish still have to eat, right? Fish, it's an animal, it's a creature that has to survive. And part of that survival is eating, right? So you can catch them in the winter. It's not a time of the year where you have to put your rods away. So we're gonna talk all about where they go, where they're living, what they're doing, how they're feeding, and all that stuff. If you've watched the fall video, this is a great transition point to have seen where those fish feed in the fall. They start to slide out. They're moving toward where they spend their winter. So now we're going to be talking about where they're at this time of the year, where they're at when the water is at some of its coldest temperatures, okay? Maybe that's a great place to start. Let's define wintertime fishing because for a guy in New Jersey or upstate New York, it's definitely different than a guy in Florida or Louisiana. It might even be a little different for a guy in the Midwest, right? But there are similarities, and there are enough similarities that as we go over these places and these movements and the way they're feeding, you'll start to really see that the commonalities outweigh the differences, okay? So let's start with defining winter. And wintertime fishing, in its broadest sense, okay, is the coldest water temperatures and the coldest air temperatures that you're going to experience all year, okay? So that's that common point, right? If you're up here in the Northeast, starting in December all the way through February, you're going to see water temperatures anywhere from the upper 40s to the mid 30s. And I'm talking about half the lake is frozen. You launch your kayak or boat or John boat and you look at your water temperature gauge and it's 37 degrees, it's 38 degrees. Dude, that's cold. That's cold, okay? So the coldest water of the year, the coldest air of the year, but the same is true if you live down south, right? If you're in Texas or Florida or Louisiana, southern Oklahoma, places like that, you're going to see some cold nights, right? You're going to see nights maybe in the 40s. You're definitely going to see nights in the 50s. You're going to wake up and it's cold. And you don't expect that living in that part of the country. You're going to wake up and put on your heavy jacket, right? You're going to put your bibs on. You're going to get to the lake, and when you drop your trolling motor, even down south, you're going to see water temperature in the 50s, upper 50s, way down south. You're going to see it mid to low 50s as you come up a little bit. And mid to low 50s in some parts of the country is the coldest water you'll see during the whole year, right? So the commonality, wintertime fishing, coldest air temperatures, coldest water temperatures you're going to see all year round, okay? All right, let's talk about that movement now. And let's talk about where these fish went to after that fall feed, right? You know, in the fall feed, dude, they were on the flats, on the shoals. If you live in a reservoir, live on a reservoir, fish a reservoir, they were in the pockets, they were in the creeks, and they were eating, right? Fall feed is great. They're eating. And as that water temperature started to plummet, we talked about how those fish were going to come out of those places. They're going to start swimming out of the creeks and the pockets and the coves. They're going to start swimming off of the flats, right? They're going to start going off of the flats and the shoals. And as they move, they were headed to where they're going to winter. And to put this in the most generic terms possible, remember, in this video we're talking about the similarities of wintertime fishing no matter where you live. Here it goes, guys. This is where these fish have went. This is where these fish traveled to after that late fall transition, is they're going to move to the deepest, most vertical break areas in the lake you're fishing or the particular section of that lake you're fishing, okay? The deepest, most vertical break areas of that lake. So, you know, when you think about that, it's kind of easy to wrap your head around that, especially when you look at a topographical map, right? Break out a topo map. If you're old school like me, break out a paper map. If you're new school, fire up your Lowrance. Fire up your depth finder, your GPS unit. Look online at some of the programs and apps that show you the contours. Sea Maps from Lowrance is a great one. And when I pull that area up, I'm looking for the deepest, most vertical break areas. And what that means is I'm looking for tight contours. I'm looking for contours that don't go like this and just gradually peter out into that deep water, the channel creek, the creek channel or the basin. I'm not looking for areas in the winter that go like this. When that water is at its coldest point of the year, I want areas that go like this, right? I want contours that are steep. And specifically, I like the 45 degree angle banks and the banks that are almost vertical, that go up and down, okay? So as you're looking at that map, okay, and you're looking at that area of the lake that you're going to fish, don't look for giant, shallow, very slow, subtle contour breaks. Look for the steeper breaks. And on a topographical map, those steeper breaks are where the lines are close together. So you're going to see contour lines that are boom, 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 one after another. And that's showing you the severity of the break. The Lowrance Sea Map, if you're using Lowrance or if you want to use an app, they're great because you can color code those contours. And the color will show you where the deepest, most vertical break areas are in that lake, okay? Now, if you're watching this right now and you live in a deep water fishery, it's a lot more obvious, right? You live in a place that has some 20 and 30 foot of water in it. You live in a reservoir that has 100 foot of water in it. It's a lot easier to detect those steeper breaks and to find those areas. But what about if you live in southern Louisiana or you live in Florida where the lakes are more bowl-shaped, right? The lakes are flatter, generally less very steep contours. It doesn't matter because you're still looking for the deepest, most vertical break areas in that lake. Remember, wintertime fishing, we're going to generalize. We're going to look more at the commonalities. So in southern Louisiana or Florida, where you don't have those big obvious breaks, you're still looking for where it's the tightest. So to give you some examples, it would be canals, right? A lot of canals in Florida, a lot of canals in southern Louisiana, and man-made canals tend to have more of a steeper break. Dynamite holes, if you're fishing, it sounds funny, but if you're fishing some of these lakes in Florida or Georgia or Louisiana, you see dynamite holes, and they're areas where they've actually mined or they've dynamited to get the material out of there, right? They tend to be steeper. Springs. Guys, if you live in a bowl-shaped lake and you identify the areas where there are natural springs, they tend to be more bowled out. And last but not least, guys, just the middle, right? The middle of the basin, often on those very bowl-shaped southern places, tend to have that deepest, most vertical break areas, right? So if you're in Minnesota or Florida or anywhere in between, we're looking for the deepest, most vertical break areas in that lake or in that fishery that you're fishing, in that particular part of that lake. All right, why? Let's talk about why. Why are the fish in the coldest part of the year, December, January, February, why are they in those areas? And guys, the reason is simple, because on an area that has a break line that looks like this, or a vertical break, right, more steep. And by the way, you know, a bank like this, I'll give you some examples. You heard me talk about those 45-degree angle banks in the winter that are so good, right? Riprap, dams, causeways, marinas, main lake points, all places where deeper water comes in and touches, right? A main lake point where a creek channel runs and bumps the side of the point and then runs back out, right? That creates that 45. The dam, they come in, they build a dam on a lake or a pond or a reservoir, and they just riprap it all the way down so that riprap has that 45-degree angle to it, right? Vertical areas, bridge pilings, bluffs, channel ledges, deep docks, right? Places where that cover is up and down, right? The walls are up and down, sea walls, up and down, deepest, most vertical break areas. And the reason they're on that steep stuff in the winter, guys, is because in the winter, the fish want the ability to go shallow to deep without expending a lot of energy, right? In the spring and in the summer and in the fall, the water temperatures are higher, their metabolism's juiced up, they're eating more, they're feeding more. They can swim a long ways. They can travel a big distance. But in the winter, they don't like that. In the winter, they don't want to have to move a lot, right? They're going to be way more lethargic in the winter than they were in the spring, summer, or fall. And because of that, these deepest, most vertical break areas of the lake provide access for the fish to go deep to shallow without exerting a lot of energy. And they love those places, okay? The other thing about those deep, most vertical break areas of the lake, they're there because their food is there. Guys, in general, the bait, the entire life circle of that fishery heads deeper in the winter. They push deeper. They push off of those flats that are just like this because there's nothing for them to eat up there. The other thing, the reason they get away from that water temperature in the winter on a slowly falling flat is a lot colder than in the deep water, right? So in the winter, you got to remember the opposite happens to that water temperature. Your deeper areas are the warmest, your shallower areas are the coldest. So more livable temperatures, but their food is there, right? The shad, the herring, the bluegill, the perch, the smelt, the cisco, everything. They've all moved to that deeper water because that's where they find their food and that's where they survive better, okay? So the deepest, most vertical break areas of the lake, man, it gives a fish the chance to move shallow to deep without expending a lot of energy. Their food source is there, and it's often the most warmest water area of the lake in the cold winter, okay? All right, let's talk about types of cover, and then I want to get into the kinds of baits we're going to use and the retrieves we're going to use to catch these fish, okay? Let's talk about cover first. So you get to that lake, and you're in that area of the lake, and you've identified a few areas that have deep vertical breaks to them, okay? You're following the footsteps here to get to the fish. You get in that area, and now you're starting to fish, and you're identifying some cover types. Guys, 100% I prefer hard cover targets in the winter. And when I'm talking about hard cover targets, I'm talking about rock, I'm talking about wood, I'm talking about gravel, I'm talking about concrete, I'm talking about metal, I'm talking about an ultra hard clay bottom, hard cover targets. I prefer hard cover targets in the winter because that is very conducive to more heat, a little more heat, right? You have a sun that's out, even though the air temperature might be 30 degrees and your water temperature might be 40 degrees. You're freezing, the water's cold, but you have a sun that's out. It really radiates off of hard cover targets. It almost gives the fish something to kind of snug up to, along with being, you know, they're trying to ambush their prey. They snug up to it because it's got a little warmth element to it. So in the winter, I really prefer hard cover targets. But here's the big but, okay? The big but in the winter is you cannot rule out soft cover targets, in particular, grass, okay? My big thing is, in the wintertime period, if you find grass that is alive, if you find green grass that is alive, and it's near that deep vertical break, could be on top of it, but if it's near that 45 bank, that angled bank, the fish will use it, okay? So don't rule out soft cover targets in the winter, especially if the grass is alive. One last thing to confuse you even more is dead grass, matted dead grass in the winter can be phenomenal, okay? So listen, dying grass, it's eating up the oxygen, it's repelling to the fish, but when that grass dies, if it dies and mats up and floats, just like a hard cover target in the winter, dead matted vegetation, decaying matter is dark and it attracts the sun's rays, just like those hard cover targets. So if you're watching this and you're in Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, even some parts of South Carolina, California on the Delta, and you have dead hyacinth mats, dead pennywort mats, dead lily pad mats. That is a viable pattern in the winter, especially when it's near that deeper, more vertical break area, right? I'm not talking about the mats that are way up on a flat and it's a mile of 2 foot of water to get to that mat. I'm talking about mats that are situated near that deeper vertical break area that we keep talking about over and over, right? It's easy for that fish to go from deep to shallow. It's easy for that fish to get under that mat. So dead, dying mats in the dead of winter, it's a viable option, okay? All right, guys, let's get to the mood of the fish, and that directly relates to these baits that we're going to fish, right? We can safely say that in the winter, a fish still has to eat, still has to feed, right? But he's going to feed less. That fish is going to feed a little differently, but he's still got to eat, right? Colder water, the coldest water of the year, everything slows down. Everything. Think about it, guys. Think about it. The entire food chain slows down. Water in the mid-50s, mid-40s, low 40s, all the way to hard water. All the way to the mid-30s, hard water, ice. Just slows everything down. And that's what we want to do with our baits, right? Our bait selection and even the way we retrieve those lures. We want to mimic what's happening in the winter, right? Coldest water of the year, fish that are more lethargic, and what they're eating is more lethargic. So, you know, we're going to fish baits that still mimic the forage. We still want to match the hatch, but we're going to fish them in such a way that mimics how that forage is living and moving, right? We get to that 45-degree angle bank. We're on a riprap bank. It's gone down a causeway, and it's got that 45-degree angle bank. And those bass are there because that's the kind of areas they show up in the winter. And they're feeding on shad, and they're eating crawfish in those rocks, right? So we're going to fish those fish with baits that mimic those things. Suspending jerkbait, amazing in the wintertime to imitate that slower, sometimes dying shad. Tight wobble crankbait, reeled a lot more slow and deliberate, just barely coming along those rocks. A jigging spoon, a metal blade bait, jigged around the bridge piling that's right around the corner of that. Just slow, little hops, right? Imitating that bait. Our jigs, our Neds, our drop shots, our little finesse plastics that are imitating crawfish or bugs. Slow on the bottom, slower movements, more deliberate, letting that skirt expand, counting the rocks as we take this jig down that 45-degree angle riprap bank, counting the rocks, fishing slow, right? So in the winter, we are really going to try to pretend, we're going to close our eyes and imagine that we're that bait that we're throwing. We're the bait. And we're trying to mimic that natural forage. Coldest water of the year, everything's slowing down, everything's getting lethargic, and that's exactly what we want to do with our lures, right? So pick a lure that mimics that forage and slow it down. You know, you've heard me say it before, but on a bait like a crankbait or a jerkbait or a lipless, the colder the water, the slower our cadence. Many times on that suspending jerkbait, guys, a stunner, Berkley stunner, I'm throwing it out there, I'm getting it down, and I'm going, tink, little rod tip, tink, and I'm stopping it. And I'm counting 10 seconds. Might hit it again a little bit. Tink, tink, hit it and let it sit again another 10 seconds. Sometimes longer, right? So the colder the water, the slower the retrieve. And it really does mimic how these fish are feeding, right? So fish can be caught in the winter, guys. Fish can be caught in the winter. Focus on the similarities that we talked about in this video, right? Coldest water of the year, coldest air temperature of the year. Look out for those deep vertical break areas. Even if you're in a shallow water fishery, whatever the deepest, most vertical break area is, it has a little bit of this to it. They're the kind of areas these fish are showing up. They're there because their food's there. They can move up and down real quick. When it comes to bait, match the hatch and slow down your retrieve. Remember, in December, January, February, the coldest part of the year, the fish still have to eat and you're still going to get some bites. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this shop video talking about more of the theory of where fish go, how they act, what they do, what they're eating in the winter, in the coldest months of the year. Even if you're into other stuff like hunting, keep your fishing rods out. You can still catch them. And a lot of times you can catch some of the biggest fish of the year in the coldest part of the winter. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. If you like these shop videos, click on that link down there. Subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe, we're coming out with a new piece of content every single week. We're also going to throw your way some good offers and stuff like that. If you're already subscribed, tell your friends about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. Here to help you become a better angler and catch more fish. Stay warm, try those things in your wintertime fishing, and you're going to catch more fish. Bye. Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli out in the shop. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, you have to check out that one, and I hope you like them.